So that covers the basics of the VBA that goes into our color coding of the elevation plots. Before we move on to the coding that goes into our user form, let's finish up with a little bit more of our Module 1 coding. The last thing in our Module 1 code, if I pull that up here real quick, let's see. Here we are. After we go through all of our color coding elevation plots, we get down here to our get hike weather program. This is just pulled exactly out of the homeworks that we've done prior in the term. We just changed a few different components of it here. We're pulling in information from the first station, which is Tucson, of 2010. Like I said, we use 2010 so that we have an entire year's worth of data to use. If we had used 2012, we would have a little bit less data. So this program right here, as you can see when we ran the user form, it pulled in all of our weather information here, nice and pretty. We've got 2010, and we've got a few different titles here that we put in just to make things a little bit easier for us if we happen to be actually looking at the raw data. However, typically the user will never actually look at this page. They'll be staying on our hiker's friend page, and they'll never actually really look at the weather unless maybe they were tweaking the program themselves. But this is where our weather data is inputted from the internet, and this is actually what our user form references when it's pulling up the max temp, the min temp, and the rainfall in our message box. So the coding that goes into this is a little bit complex, so let's start with our Module 1 code just to keep things started from the beginning. So if I pull up our Module 1 right here, this is our get hike weather. Very simple, like I said, straight out of the homework. We use an array, we define our different columns, we pull in the information from the internet and delimit it so that it is separated into the different columns. So that's pretty basic. But if we move on now to the actual code that goes into the user form, that's where we see how that information is pulled in for our user as they're entering that into the form. And that's where it gets a little bit tricky. So we're going to look at that now. So now, taking a look at the user form VBA that deals with our weather lookup, we're going to scroll down here on our form code until we see this section right here. We've got our annotations here that kind of tell you what's going on. It's the math that goes into looking up the max temp, the min temp, and the rainfall for the date entered into the form. So it starts off pretty simple. First, we just dimension our new variables that go into this little bit of math here. We've got year, day, temp, and answer. We're dimensioning these as integers and a variant. So the math's pretty simple. It's a little bit rough, but it's the way that it works best for us. When the user inputs a month, we multiply this value times 30, the average number of days in a month, and then we subtract 30 minus the day value that they enter. What this gives us is a numerical answer for the total number of days into the year, that equates to the month and the date that they entered into the form. This value, the total number of days into the year that they selected, we are defining as year day. That's our new variable that we dimensioned above. Once we have that year day value, we're going to go ahead and look up the value in that cell in column number 4 of our weather worksheet, which, if you remember, is where our weather information was actually put in from the internet source. And we're going to define the value in that cell as temp. Now temp is actually our maximum temp. Let's go ahead and take a look at what we just looked up and defined as temp. So as I said, it's year day. So for instance, say the 36th day of the year, and it's in column 4. If we go over to our weather worksheet right over here, we can move over to column 4, which is already highlighted here as D, and we could go down to the 36th day of the year, which you can see right here, and it will pull that value right there out of the cell and define it as temp, which is our maximum temperature. Now likewise, if we take a look at the code that goes right below that here, temp 2 is actually our minimum temperature, and that's defined as that same year-day value except one more column over, which, if we take a look at our weather worksheet, is our minimum value. So if we take a look at those two values, we've got our maximum and minimum temp. There's only one more thing that we wanted to pull out of this weather worksheet. And if we go back to our code here, we can see how we do that. These two lines right here, before I move on to the next part, by the way, are actually how we output into our message box the maximum and minimum temperature. We just use these AND statements so that we can include the date that we entered into the user form to make it a little bit more specific. So, as I said, our output here is the minimum and maximum temperature using the date to be nice and specific. After that, we go down here to pull in our rain value. This one we just made nice and simple. If that value in the weather worksheet is greater than 0 for our column 12, which if we take a look at our weather worksheet, is, our rainfall here. So if that value is greater than 0, which as you can see here often in Tucson, the rainfall per day is 0, but if it's greater than 0, which means that we are having rain on that day, if we go here to our hike code, if the value is greater than 0, then we will display a line 4, which states it will rain, and then the number of inches. So this is just a nice little add-on here. It won't pop up if the value is 0 or if there will be no rainfall, but if there is going to be rainfall, the user will be displayed with a statement letting them know how many inches it's going to rain that day, or it is raining that day. So that's just a nice little bonus there. So that's really how we take that weather data that we pulled in from the internet using our array, and we manipulate it through our user form to output some information to the message box that's very useful for the hiker that's trying to use our program here. So that was a nice little segue because we're already now looking at our user form code after we took a look at our weather here. So why don't we go ahead and just look at the rest of the code that goes into our very nice clean user form that we showed you earlier. So starting here at the top, we've got our 2 command buttons. As you saw earlier in the form, and I'm going to go ahead and pull that up for you so that you can take a look at it. Let's pull that up here next to us and resize a couple of things. So this is what our form looked like earlier on in the demonstration. We've got our 2 command buttons here. Command button 1 is the accept, and command button 2 is the close. They're very simple. They open and close the program. After that, we start off here by defining our command box options here, which are our telephone line, 7 Falls, and East Fork Trail. Now here's a good time to mention something a little bit tricky that we did. The way that we were able to make the specific trail elevation plots that the user selects pop up is that earlier on in the program we made all of these plots invisible, and then as we named each of the charts after these exact names up here, we were able to later on, as I'll show you, make them visible as the user selects them in the form. So that's kind of something interesting to keep an eye for as we go through this demonstration. So after we defined all of our combo box options here, we moved down to the actual show info data bulk of the code here. We've got some different annotations up here just to kind of help keep things simple for us and for you. We stated what each of our different options are in terms of just kind of common language inputs. So we've got our checkbox 2 is weather info, checkbox 3 is area model, etc. We dimension our variables, and then we move down here to define the variables as what we want them to be. And then we start getting into kind of the bulk of the code here. This is our if-then statements for our 3 checkboxes that the user is able to select from, our different options for what we want to output. This kind of makes the form a little bit more flexible, so the user can actually not even take a look at any of these values if they don't want to. But obviously I think the user would probably want to pull up as much of this as possible. So we look at our if-then statements, and like I said earlier, the way that we made the charts pop up is if checkbox 1 for elevation plot is selected, then the chart object referencing trail, which is referenced through the combo box which the user selected earlier, becomes visible. It's simple. It follows a few different kind of references here, but it actually works. To reiterate, in case it got cut off in our last video, after referencing trail in our combo box, we see that the chart objects become visible if they selected the checked option. So as we move down here, we dimension a few more variables, like I stated for this math portion for the weather. We won't go through that again. And then we just have some simple lines here outputted to our message box. We have enjoy your hike and the text box 1 value, which is the user's name. It's just kind of cute. And then we define what our data is here, our 4 different lines that we use throughout this code. And if save equals true, which is referencing our accept button, then we have message box display the data that we defined above. And that's it for our form code. It's very simple. As I stated, there's a lot of references that go into making the different charts visible, but the end product is very smooth. So let's take a look at it one more time. So now let's run it one more time. We would reset to eliminate our elevation plots from the prior running of the program, and then we just click plan today's hike. We input our name. We pick a trail. This time let's do telephone line just for fun. We pick a day. Let's say it's January 21st. That's a good day. We pick our 3 options because we'd like to do all 3 of them. Click accept, and look at that. We actually picked a day in which we can see how the rain code works. That pops up there as the 4th line. It will rain 11.18 inches. We've got our 2 max and min temperatures, and we've got enjoy our hike. So we click OK. We click close. We pull this back up here, and you can see our 2 elevation plots. So that is our program. We're going to go ahead and click Reset here just to show you how they disappear. And the user's ready to use the form all over again. So thank you very much. We appreciate it, and let us know if you have any questions.